Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about the Warriors of Chaos in Radious Total War for Warhammer 3, Immortal Empires. And oh my, the changes made to Warriors of Chaos are fantastic. They absolutely improve the campaign situation for them in some very substantial and not necessarily very substantial ways at the first glance, but things that do absolutely count for quite a bit. Of course, we do have the usual with Radius, in that you do get different faction effects, lord effects potentially, skill lines, etc. New lords available, or certain changes to things available. I mean, in this case, we don't have new lords, but we do have substantial changes to how the race does work. So, in the case of Warriors of Chaos, the biggest change, by far and away, is the fact that their recruitment is no longer just tied to the warband recruitment system. Instead, when you build structures, you can just flat out recruit units normally. I mean, you still have your gifted units, you still have warband recruitment and warband upgrade, but you do have regular unit recruitment. And that is freaking awesome. Because one of the problems of Warriors of Chaos is, especially with infantry, I would say, that you did struggle to recruit units. Because you would have to recruit Marauders and then level them up, get the experience level, and then turn them into Warriors of Chaos and Chosen, and so on. And that is a really, really good change that the Radius team has done over here for Warriors of Chaos. There are, of course, a couple of other changes made in terms of like warband upgrade, so on, new units, but that is one of the big changes made to them. On top of that, beyond that, they've also made it so that Warriors of Chaos no longer have outposts. Instead, they have regular minor settlements. Of course, it's still incredibly beneficial to have dark fortresses, absolutely, but you do have regular settlements available to you. So you can have things like hero recruitment, economic, and very crucially, growth. Because you see, one of the big problems for Warriors of Chaos in the base game is that the growth of your dark fortresses is very limited as a result of the fact that your altars, your outposts, don't really function as regular settlements. So ends up limiting you in a fairly substantial way. Of course, there is a way around this if you're Undivided or Nurgle, and that is specifically through the Bloom of Decay, growth per region 75 after winning a battle. So you do have that, and to be honest, I think this should be nerfed but made Undivided, so everyone has it. Like, nerf it to like 20, 30, however much. And I'm not necessarily talking about Radius here, I'm talking about Creative Assembly here. Because you either have Nurgle gifts, or you don't, and if you don't, your growth is limited. Now, in the base game, that's not necessarily so much of a problem, but it does limit your potential in a campaign. So you do have those changes, and that's great, and it's also secondary effects from something like this. The secondary effect in this particular case is because if you have minor settlements available to you as a player, you now have an easier way of getting vassalization through diplomacy with various factions, like what I just did with Epidemius. Now, mind you, in this case, I did go to war with Epidemius, defeated him, but now I gain him as vassal. So instead of subjugating factions, which, yes, you can still do that, I believe, you might want to check on that, not 100%, but I do believe you can still subjugate factions. But now diplomacy works a lot better, which is kind of a big deal if you're talking about Archeon, because Archeon in particular, with all his diplomatic benefits and souls per vassal, is a fairly big deal. He also gets research rate for each vassalized faction. So all of this ends up playing out in his favor. You don't necessarily want to have a lot of minor vassals. What you do want to do is instead you want to have a lot of these major factions as vassals. So in this case, if I look at the diplomacy situation, I've got Boris Ursus, I just got Epidemius, I got Tamarkon, I got Arbol as vassals. And I'm also working on getting Astrogoth as a vassal. So that does end up working substantially better, because Warriors of Chaos diplomacy or vassalization for diplomacy kind of felt behind some other factions. Specifically, think of it from this perspective. Because you can't trade regular settlements when you're playing in a Warriors of Chaos campaign with barracks, you either trade Dark Fortresses, which is like, ouch, or you just subjugate them. But if you look at Khorne can, sure, there's constant skulls, Khorne can take regular settlements and then build barracks very quickly, and then sell those elements for vassalization. I understand that it's an imperfect system, the building barracks, region trading stuff for vassalization agreements, but that's how it is played in the game. So that change with settlements does end up having those kind of secondary effects that end up working very, very well for the Warriors of Chaos. Now, in terms of settlements, or rather Dark Fortresses, it's also a bit beyond that, because you now have all kinds of wonderful units available over here. I'm not sure how it is for Valkia. I imagine she gets skull cannons as well. Maybe, hopefully. But you do at least have Hell Cannon recruitment through your regular settlements. And that's a pretty big deal, because Hell Cannons, obviously you can acquire them through the Gifts of Chaos, but the Gifts of Chaos is a gimmicky system. I mean, it would be nice as a benefit on top of everything you have, but it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like a side benefit or a secondary system that you use for recruitment of those kind of gifted units. It works as a primary one. Yes, you do have maximum capacity for these kind of gifted units in your army, but then you also have regular recruitment. So ends up being pretty damn good, or at least substantially better in a campaign, because it feels you're less playing with gimmicky systems and more you're playing a regular campaign with some extra stuff that makes it cool on top of that. And that is a really good thing. Skill line wise, there's with Radius you do gain more skill points, but also on top of that you don't have skills restricting as much as they do in the base game. I believe there's still some restrictions dependent on heroes and lords, what you're talking about, but for the most part, the restrictions are far less than they are in the base game. So, essentially, a campaign like Archeon feels substantially better. To be certain, Be'lakor, Valkia, and Festus do still have the best campaigns, but this does make all Warriors of Chaos campaigns substantially better than they are in the base game. One of the things that I would certainly say is, yes, with regards to the gifts, especially the Nurgle one, the growth there is pretty substantial, but it's also kind of a bit annoying having to spend so many turns researching various things in order to unlock, Gift of Slaanesh, as well as Mark of Slaanesh. That's on Creative Assembly, the way they locked it behind, but I do believe this is one of those things where you could say, yes, the modders should have been changing this from my perspective. But overall, a lot better, a lot more unit variety in your own way, because yes, you do get more units as well, a lot more unit variety. Like obviously here, we talk about like undivided units, but there's also, of course, the mono-guard units as well that are available in a campaign. And you know what? Just being able to recruit the chosen stack after a point in your campaign, as opposed to going through the entire warband upgrade system, is better. And you do have extra units on top of that, DLC units, DLC legendary heroes, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, if you're looking for a superior Warriors of Chaos experience, I would absolutely recommend Radious Total War. It just makes it better. Now, are you still ridiculously powerful? Yes, you are. Though that's the thing about Radius. you're not the only one. The thing about Warriors of Chaos in the base game is they're so far ahead that compared to everyone else, if you're willing to tolerate the grind of warband upgrades and recruitment, they're so far ahead of everyone else that very few can stand up to them. That's the problem when you build systems like this, as Creative Assembly does. And that makes their campaigns boring in Radius because of the fact that every faction does get a lot of these awesome stuffs. You know, extra units, better units with armor, so that means better auto-resolve. Because that's the thing about an army of Chosen or Chaos Warriors, you can just auto-resolve your way to victory. More building slots as well. That's, another thing to be mentioned here. There's more building slots available early on for provincial capitals. All of those things end up creating a situation in which you do have more power, more versatility, and so on, but so does everyone else. That's the problem some people criticize about Radius. It's like, oh, everyone has an awesome toolkit or has an answer to every problem. But that's not a negative, the way some people criticize Radius for. That's a major plus because it evens the playing field and makes campaigns feel less like, I picked the faction that's really OP, I'm going to dominate everyone. That's not how it plays in Radius. And I think that's a much better baseline for what the game should be compared to what we have in vanilla. That's all I had to say. Christine, sign out and stay tuned for more.